reason lose me, then come out and come back in again. We're live.
Hey, there we are.
Sorry, folks, we've just had a little technical hitch. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Sarah Jane, and welcome to Gift of Healing TV. And I apologize for the delay in this. I have no idea what happened, never had that happen before. Anyway, I am delighted to have with me today Gayle Nowak. Gayle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation today, Sarah.
Let me the topic of our program this evening is healing shame, silence, and invisibility. And I think both Gayle and I can totally resonate with that, as I'm sure many of you can. But let me introduce you to Gayle properly first. Gayle Nowak is a visibility sage, certified sourced TM, retreat master, and speaker on business, self-leadership, and transformation. As the creator of Sage Sensations TM retreats, she facilitates self-healing, energy shifts, and heart leadership that support New Earth leaders in making their magic more visible. Gayle leads private and small group retreats that guide clients as they open their hearts, own their power, and fully express their true self in a world that teaches us to be fake. She has honed her marketing and business expertise through more than 25 years of experience as journalist, copywriter, public relations director, and transformational coach. She's also been developing her gifts as an empath, intuitive, and spiritual healer since childhood. It's the combination of these pragmatic and esoteric skills that support clients in clearing visibility blocks and creating soul-aligned marketing as they rise into new levels of visibility and expand their impact. Gayle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the beautiful introduction.
Well, it's amazing how much I think all of us have done. And the only time we ever get to realize it is when we actually hear it. We're going to start. Let you sort of share, please, a little bit about your story, how you come to do what you do, and why this, our particular topic this evening, is so important to you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about my experiences and my story around this and my journey around visibility. And as you mentioned, I am a visibility coach. And so for me, visibility, a lot of times when I'm talking about it, has to do with business. And I talk about it through the lens of business in the sense of getting known and getting exposure and getting clients. And it's also so much more than that. I've seen this through my own experiences. I've seen this through the experiences of my clients, that really visibility is an invitation, and I would say sometimes an initiation to heal the wound of self. And there's so many of us in the world today who have either felt or still feel unworthy and flawed and like we don't belong. And it's often because our true self, our true nature, our true essence was rejected, neglected, stifled by others in some way in the past. And usually in childhood, I've also seen, in working with my clients, and it's been my own experience as well, that this has shown up in past lives or has been an ancestral pattern that shows up. And that was certainly the case for me. I learned early on that it seemed like other people's needs were mattered more. They were more important than mine. I learned that it felt safer for me to keep things bottled up inside. I learned to be really hyper vigilant, both emotionally and physically. And yet, all of that kept me in a cycle of really limiting the very things that I craved. Um, really deep, rich connections and nurturing relationships and opportunities to live into whatever was happened to be calling my soul at any given time. And this really started, I was born into kind of that environment. And I think I really started to come to a head when I was 9 years old, and I made a promise to be silent. I was growing up in a dysfunctional environment, an unhealthy, abusive family, and that really hit me directly at age 9 in the form of sexual abuse. And later, as I did my inner work, I recognized emotional abuse and neglect as well. And so when that experience, when the sexual abuse started to happen, I kept my mouth shut. I kept my mouth shut because I was terrified, Sarah, that if I spoke up, all hell would break loose and I'd lose my family. And so I stayed silent about this for 5 years until it really became too painful. It became too much of a burden for me to keep quiet any longer. And I finally told my family what was going on, and all the things that I feared would happen didn't. I thought I was running the worst case scenario in my mind. My fear of that was really part of what was keeping me stuck in this silent place. And then when I actually had the courage to speak up, the worst case scenario that I hadn't even thought of was actually what played out. And, not surprisingly, my abuser denied everything. My family didn't believe me and swept it all under the rug as if nothing had happened at all. And that actually was far more confusing, far more devastating to me, because even though I somehow found the courage to tell the truth, break the silence, no one heard me. And it was shocking. I felt like basically the message was, it doesn't matter. And I was on my own to figure this out. So I was 14 at that time. And I knew I was going to be going off to college in a few years, but I was on my own as far as like, how am I going to navigate the next 4 years of my life? Like, how am I going to keep myself safe? And the only thing that I could really think of was to make myself invisible, right? To not be a target. And that actually worked for me on some levels. The abuse ended, but of course the trauma from it all was very much alive. I didn't receive the support that I needed to even deal with that, to even understand that it was trauma. And so I had this survival pattern of hiding out and holding back and, not advocating for my feelings and my needs and what was true for me in order to stay safe. But that's how I learned to be in the world. And that continued into adulthood. I didn't really start to see how that was hindering me until after I started my business in 2013. And that, even though I, had a career prior to that in communications and journalism and marketing and public relations, a fairly visible career, right? There's something different about transitioning from promoting others into promoting yourself. And it brought up a lot of things that were under the surface because I had to be more visible and it was more personal than what I was used to. And also at that time, I started out my business really focusing on helping my clients find and create and share their signature stories so that they could have greater connection with their audiences, so that they could be more visible, right? And to connect in that way. And what I was noticing is this pattern of clients coming to me with very similar experiences, different details, but some pretty challenging childhood experiences that actually were pivotal to the creation of their businesses. And so this was sort of happening organically, right? There was something in them that I was speaking to, but wasn't intentionally speaking to at that time. And I was really more so leading with story and the strategy behind it, and very much from the mind and from my zone of excellence also. And then we'd get behind closed doors, we'd get into our a workshop or a one-on-one session, and then all that inner work would start to unfold. But I wasn't talking about it. And often people would get in the room with me and they would tell me things and they would say, I've never told anybody this. And we would work through those places because they would have shame about certain aspects of their story. And so we would work through that, and we would develop like these beautiful marketing assets, story and messaging, and speaker materials and PR materials. And some of my clients would then not use them. So they would invest the time and the energy and the money into creating these things that were very powerful and foundational to their business, but then they wouldn't necessarily use them. And I was like, what's happening here? We're like, what's going on here? And also at that time, I was about 2 years into my business, I was really frustrated and with my own results and curious about what I was witnessing, this pattern I was witnessing with my clients, with these really deep personal stories, and then also the fact that they weren't sharing them. And lo and behold, that's exactly what I was doing, was that I had this really deep personal story that I wasn't sharing. I was certainly sharing all kinds of stories, but not the story. And part of that is because, number one, I couldn't make sense of it. I had a knowing that it was important to share it. But number one, I was terrified. I was definitely terrified. And number two, I just couldn't make sense of it. I was like, I don't understand how this is actually relevant. And so I just kept kind of like brushing it aside, even though I kept hearing this voice, like, tell your story, tell your story. And I was like, no, not that story. And so instead, I relied on all my old coping mechanisms, right? And so I'm a recovering overachiever. And one of my go-to coping mechanisms is working really hard to make things happen. And so this is, I share this because it's a really nuanced point, because I actually looked quite visible within my own invisibility, because I was doing all the things. I was networking, I was doing the social media, the books, running, the Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups and the Facebook ads and like all of it. I was doing all of it, right? Because for me, like, I love marketing. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't, and that was really my zone of excellence. So that was like easy for me. And yet I wasn't getting the results. And I was like, what? Okay. So there's a lot of things happening here that I'm noticing. And like this, my ability to set goals and get things done. And that's worked for me before, but it's not working for me now. Like, what's going on? And the reality was that all I could see is my maxed out credit cards, uh, the monthly revenue roller coaster, the mixed results with the clients, and my confidence was really tanking because I was like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be good at marketing, and but what's happening with my business? Like, that would indicate that I'm not, right? And so, Sarah, maybe you and perhaps those who are tuning in can think of a time in your own life when you wanted something different than what you were experiencing, yet you weren't able to reach it without letting go of the old ways of being or the old patterns that had worked for you in the past. And that's really what was starting to come up for me with my business. And it reminds me of Carl Jung, the quote from Carl Jung that you may be familiar with. Some watching maybe you're familiar with it too. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll continue to call it fate. And so I think I was having one of those moments, right? I was learning that I couldn't think, do, or spend my way or learn my way to a different outcome. And so I share that because what I discovered is that really, in order to heal shame and silence and invisibility, and really any other wound that's keeping us from who we truly are as a soul, is that we have to go within and we have to sit with our discomfort and we have to listen to our heart and that quiet voice that we want to ignore. And I really I wish I could say, oh, I heard the voice and I acted right away. No, I did everything else I possibly could think of until that was the only thing left. I resisted telling that story for as long as I could because it really, the thought of exposing that part of myself and the worry about what people would think of me literally made me sick to my stomach. It made me sick to my stomach. And yeah, I could not, I was at an impasse and I couldn't walk away. Luckily, I look at this now, I'm like, oh, it's a good thing. Like I actually couldn't walk away without trying. So I ultimately decided to publicly share this story in an email campaign for one of my offerings at the time. And all the same things, all the stuff got triggered, right? Like all the same worries came rushing right back to the surface as they did from when I was 9 years old. You know, what if it's too much? Like, what if it's too disturbing? What if it hurts someone? What if I offend somebody? What if they think I'm lying? I don't want people to feel bad for me. And maybe those who are watching can relate to those thoughts and those feelings. And somehow, I don't know, by the grace of God, maybe, right? Like I was able to acknowledge and be with that and ultimately share this particular story with my community at that time. And what happened from a business perspective is that the month before I launched that campaign, I'd made less than $100 for the entire month. And I think that was also like the straw that broke the camel's back too, because it was like, well, you can make money, but you're going to make the money that you make is really a reflection of where you're at internally. And so within 3 weeks of sharing that campaign that included my story, I signed on 3 new clients. I made more than $7,800 in sales, which at that time was the most and the fastest money I'd ever made in my business. And I was like, oh, it worked. And it wasn't like, and I say that, and I'm like, it wasn't a strategy, right? Like it was really a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And I did doubt it. I was like, well, maybe it's a fluke. But what I did feel and not doubt was how different I felt. Like I knew something had changed within me. I had a newfound confidence, and I had a deeper commitment to my work. And um, speaking at events and doing interviews felt different. I felt more grounded. I felt safer. I enjoyed it more. Um, I ultimately, several years after that, I ultimately stopped offering done for you marketing services and really transitioned into leading retreats, these visibility breakthrough experiences and retreats, which that in and of itself was like a big shift. So had I continued to stay stuck in that shame and silence and invisibility, all those doors that had opened for me would have stayed shut. And I wouldn't be here today talking about this with you. And really, it's like, I don't know. I wish somebody had told me this years ago, but expressing your true self and being seen doing that can be triggering.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's normal. And it's also totally possible to find your way back to feeling grounded and unshakable and good about being visible, whether that's in your business, whether it's in your relationships, your personal life, whatever, right? Because this applies. I learned this lesson through my business, but I saw how this impacted me personally in my relationship. So whatever it is, whatever the catalyst is for you, it applies, right? When you've healed those false beliefs that you're not worthy, that you're not lovable, you can actually feel good about speaking up and claiming space. You can reconcile with those parts of yourself that you want to maybe bury. You can actually see and hear and love yourself first, regardless of how others see and hear and love you back or not, right? And so, had I not had that experience, had I not said yes to taking that journey for myself, I wouldn't be able to sit with my clients in their depths, right? And really see them, sit with them there, but also see them as whole and empowered and guide them into their next level of not just their visibility, but their humanity and their divinity too.
And I think it's very important, isn't it, to realize that when we share our story, we empower others to share theirs.
Yeah.
If we're not prepared to share our story, and these days I can share my story almost with a smile. You know, I am very aware of the reaction of everybody. It's in an audience or whatever. I am very aware of the reaction because of what I went through. Very different to yours and a much younger age. But oh boy, it left me feeling unwanted, unloved, not good enough. Yes, you put me in a room full of people. How can I sink into the floor? Can I sink into the wall? Absolutely, the invisibility thing. Get it 100%. When we share our story, as you are aware, people connect with you because it's somebody understands. We may not have gone through exactly the same thing. And it's not necessarily the story of what happened, so much the story of how it left us feeling, how we lived our lives because of it. Because that, I think, is where the true, you really do understand why I feel unloved, why I feel unworthy, why I keep quiet, why I just want to sink and not be seen. All of those things, and why we have so much difficulty in fulfilling our own lives. But something came to me. I was thinking about it earlier. And for those of us as insecure as I was, and and I know it sounds really strange to say that I was, but I was. And I worked in retail for many years. And there was one sort of job I'd actually just resigned, having been there for a number of years. I was running the toy department, the greeting card department, and the children's toys department. And I had regular customers that would come in respect to the children's books as much as anything. And one day this lady came up to me and she said, "Please don't ever leave." Because of how helpful I always was. We are not as invisible as we think we are. There are people that see that amazing aspect, that amazing being that we are. And if you've had anything even remotely resembling that happen, realize that you have been seen. And that's from somebody who said it. How many more were there that came back to me year on year saying, "Oh, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that?" Because they knew that I always would do my absolute best for them. It doesn't matter what your role is. It's about if you are giving 100% in spite of your insecurities, people will see the real you, as difficult as that might be to believe.
I love that you shared that. I've had similar experiences, and it's a little mind-blowing. It's humbling.
Yeah.
I remember I've had it happen a few times, and you're right. Like, how many people don't actually come back and reflect back to you, and so grateful to those who have, because often when I don't know if this has been your experience, Sarah, but there have been times where those messages, those reflections have come to me exactly at the perfect moment, like exactly when I'm questioning, like, am I even doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? I had it happen to me maybe a few weeks ago. I think this is like the entrepreneur's plight of just constantly questioning, like, am I on the right path? Am I doing that? Like, do I need to be doing something else? And then it's almost like clockwork now. I think Spirit's like, no, here you go. Here's the little proof. But I remember the first time it happened, and it was really surprising because it didn't have to do, this was before I was in business. And it was like, one of the situations was with a close friend. And another one was just, somebody I had gone to school with, but we weren't that close. And so it is a really humbling experience to hear from somebody else, I see you. And I'm watching you. And it's like, and not in that creepy way, but just there's something that you're doing that is speaking to me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
And so we're not, even when you feel like you're alone and nobody sees you and nobody hears you, it's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true.
And it's not true at all. And sharing our story is a major thing. It really is. But it's also, as I said, I think we had the conversation just before we started. I see these quotes about sort of don't revisit your past. And you and I both agree. There are times to view your past. Be aware of what happened. For me, because of the way I work, it's very much a matter of visiting and being with my younger self at the time that something happened. As I said, mine really went back to being a baby. And it's not about living in the past. It's being about being aware of your past. What happened? But I think one of the other things for me is, again, because of what happened to me, and we can learn so much from what happened and potentially why it happened. For me, it was circumstances way outside my parents' control. That didn't help me as a 1-year-old.
Right.
Because you cannot explain circumstances to a 1-year-old. But when you can look back as an adult and you can view a whole situation, what did your parents go through? What did their parents, your grandparents, go through? Is it a learned behavior? Is it their own insecurity in your case that meant they had to believe an adult over a child? All things that we would class as being very wrong, but what was their upbringing and therefore their perception? It may have been majorly difficult for them. Maybe they'd even gone through something and they'd been accused of being a liar. And my youngest sister, who's been on some of our programs before, she would try telling the truth and she would get called a liar. She would then tell a lie and be told, congratulations for telling the truth.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
Which, of course, left her totally confused. I could get congratulated for lying and I get told off for telling the truth. So as a young child, the confusion between what is truth and what is lie, and then it's trying to get your head wrapped around that.
Right.
And then get it wrapped round it again when you realize that actually you just weren't believed. And that was the sad part of it. So 100%.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about visiting and revisiting. And I know, inner child work has been a part of your journey. It's certainly been one of the more healing parts of my journey as well, is being able to acknowledge, being in the adult state, acknowledging the child and the feelings of the child and the situation of the child and validating. And that's been hugely transformational and healing, and opened up the ability to forgive and to see the bigger picture. And you're absolutely right. I don't necessarily have all the details of, my situation. I have a lot of details, enough to know, right? This is generations.
Yeah.
This is generations and different details, different, experiences, but I can still see. And I kind of had a knowing of that even before, but I had to feel I had to go through, and I hadn't done this because I didn't have a container to do it. I didn't have the right support and the right tools at the time, but I still needed to go through the anger and the rage and the grief.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to feel those things in order to get to a place where I can really look at what happened, not necessarily condone it by any means, but also understand, like, these were people who were doing the best they could with what they had. And I know in my heart of hearts that they love me in their way. And I needed something else, and they weren't able to provide it. And I think that there's a lot of talk about forgiveness, and I really struggled with that. but I found through, I needed some of this I could do on my own, and some of this I really needed support. I needed to work with coaches. I needed to work with healers, and I needed to be in those kinds of containers where I was seen and I was heard and I was validated. It's such an important part of any healing journey, whatever the details are. And it wasn't until I had that experience and that level of support that I was really able to see, like, I have a choice. I can continue to identify as the victim in this story, and this isn't a judgment. I don't want anybody to get tripped up on the word victim, right? Like, because sometimes we're legit victimized, right? I don't have to identify and live that out. I actually have the choice to learn from. We were talking about this beforehand, right? To learn from it, to leverage it, and to let it go.
Yeah.
And it does sometimes take a while to get to that point. But you get to that point by being able to really face, but also have compassion for yourself, and ultimately compassion for the other people involved.
Yes, forgiveness. And I think a lot of people think, oh, I've got to forgive them. And a lot of people's reaction is, I have to forgive them. No, you don't. The most important person for you to forgive is yourself.
Yeah.
For going through things for as long as you did.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely, oh my gosh, when I really started to sit down with things, I was like, I can't. Oh my God, why didn't I do, and so that will come up. Those thoughts will come up, and it's like, it's okay that they come up. And at the same time, it's like, just recognize that whether you were a child or not, you're an adult, like, you were doing the best you could with a situation that was probably largely out of your control.
I think what we could genuinely say, especially when it's in childhood, it is out of your control.
Right.
And the younger you are when something happens, it absolutely is out of your control, because you haven't learned enough about life to know that you can say no. And I think that's one of the big problems, isn't it, in life? Especially as women, we are taught to say yes. Everybody has to come before us, as you were saying right at the beginning of this, sort of, we don't come anywhere on the list. It's not a matter of we come bottom of the list. And it's time we learnt that in our life, as is it Kate Winslet's character says in the film, The Holiday. Is it Kate Winslet?
Is that where they swap places?
Yeah, the houses.
Yeah.
And she's having the meal out with the older guy, and she turns around and says, "That was brutal, but you are so right. I should be the leading lady in my own life." And the minute I heard that, I thought, I wonder if the individual who wrote those lines realized just how powerful they are, and how many people who have heard them have really heard them. And it's not just about ladies, it is about men too.
Yeah,
because I have worked with both men and women who have been abused. And what happened to me, although it was an accident, the resulting things that happened after that were technically abuse by the system.
Mm-hmm.
And Injuries can be one thing, but it's the trauma that can be caused almost after that in the treatment. And we've got to realize that a lot of people, I know they've discovered PTS, well, they call it post-traumatic stress disorder. I'd like to take the disorder off the end. A lot of people may have been suffering that from a very young age.
Yeah.
And it's their way of dealing with it, of coping with their life, that makes them think that they haven't got anything to think about, to worry about. And you haven't got anything to worry about. You can heal. For me, without drugs. But are you ready? Are you ready to find the individual or individuals who are out there ready to support you? Because I really do believe that there's something much deeper than whatever actually triggered it. And it's supporting people to find what's deeply buried. And once that can be found, then, so I guess you went through post-traumatic stress.
I probably did. I would not doubt it. It's not been an official diagnosis by any means. And based on my own research, most likely. And like you, not that I think that there's a time and a place for medication, but generally speaking, I found my own way to healing. And a lot of that really had to do with my curiosity, but also I just have always been a spiritual person. And I think that I was being supported along the way because I didn't have the personal support in my family or in the physical plane, so I had to look beyond that, and I had to receive from beyond that. It's not to say that, it's the traditional means, that I have nothing at all against that. But it's really important, like you said, to decide, like, are you committed to changing? And are you open to receiving the help? Whether that's from a traditional therapist, or whether that's from medication, or whether that's from going to alternative healers, right? Yeah. Or even in places that you'd be surprised to find healing. I mean, a lot of my healing was done through my business. So you just have to be open to it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it really is that openness and willingness. Because I've had people that experience tasters of what I do, and it's been, Sarah, I love what you do, but I am not ready for what you can do. And that's what we have to understand. And so I don't push anything. I really don't push anything. I will talk about it very openly. But people have to be ready. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And once they're guided, and it's not a matter of find one person, because one person might start the journey, but then there will be others that will help you to continue it. It's trust your gut. Trust that intuition, that inspiration. Why is something coming at you? I tend to listen these days.
Me too.
But,
the hard-learned lesson.
Exactly. So sort of I've gone a bit over because we had technical issues at the beginning, but we're coming to an end. So Gayle, thank you so very much. Is there anything more you would like? I'm going to put your website address up here. Is there anything more that you would like to share before we close?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to just leave everyone with is that we didn't come here to hide in the shadows, right? Whether that's hiding from ourselves or hiding in our relationships, in our businesses, our careers, our missions, and really the magic and the mystery of life comes alive when we are freely expressing who we truly are in a healthy way. And when we know that we can receive whatever comes as a result of that. And it's probably sounds easier said than done, and it can be done. I'm like the least likely person to have done it. So it can be done. And we can't afford to be invisible anymore. We can't.
No, it's definitely time to become visible again for each and every one of us. And there are a lot of us out there who have made ourselves visible. Find the person that speaks to you, speaks to your heart, to your soul, their energies. That's the most important thing. If you would like to connect with Gayle, if you're watching the video on YouTube, please, underneath in the comments, no, not the comments, the information, you will find Gayle's website address. Please do feel free to connect with her. You can also put comments under there. Should receive notification of comments, and I will let Gayle know so that she can respond to you. But if it's something you want to ask me, then please ask me as well. Or if it's both of us, we'll both answer you. The one thing we said before the program was we're actually people who like to answer comments. So providing we know they're there, we will do that. So please feel free. If it's something you prefer to keep more private, then please do email me at giftofhealingtv@gmail.com. And if it's to go to Gayle, I will forward it to her. I'm not going to share anybody's information with anybody, but you just asked me to forward it to Gayle, and I will. So please feel free. Again, you can put a comment on the Gift of Healing TV website. And if you say, please don't share, then I won't, because I have to authorize any comment that goes up onto the website. Again, I can then forward anything on to Gayle to get her to respond. So please feel free to do just that. Gayle, thank you so very much. I'm sorry we had the glitch at the beginning, but hey ho, that's as it was.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Next week, we've got a today's conversation, Creativity, Magic in the Mistakes with Jenny Han. And then the following week, learn more about Akashic Records. So I hope you will join us for those. In the meantime, folks, take care, be safe, stay well. Namaste, sweet souls. Thank you, Gayle.
Bye.
Bye.